Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 15th of January of 2026. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Russia, because during the previous 24 hours lots of very important statements were made by the President of the Russian Federation. First, there was a statement made by the Kremlin spokesman Peskov. He stated that the Putin will address ambassadors on foreign policy at the credential ceremony, and later he emphasized that Kremlin agrees with Trump's position that Zelensky is holding up the peace process. The situation for the Kyiv regime is deteriorating daily, and the decision-making corridor is narrowing. It's time for Zelensky to take responsibility for making peace-promoting decisions, but he's not doing so. Russia hasn't received a US response to Putin's initiative to extend the New START treaty, but is awaiting one. A more favorable New START treaty would be needed for everyone, but developing one is a complex and lengthy process. And later, the President of the Russian Federation made lots of very interesting statements, and those were not just like regular statements. That was something like the final message to Ukraine and to Zelensky. For the sake of a settlement in Ukraine, we must return to discussing Russia's initiatives for a new and just security architecture. So the most important thing is not like to return to discussing initiatives for new and just security achievement architecture. He's saying about the Russian position, which means that this is something like an ultimatum to the Western countries, to Ukraine as well. A peaceful settlement in Ukraine must be achieved as soon as possible. The Ukrainian crisis is a direct consequence of years of ignoring Russia's rights and NATO's advance towards its borders, contrary to public promises made to Moscow. Russia will continue to consistently pursue its goals in Ukraine. The international situation is deteriorating. Dozens of countries are suffering from the infringement of their sovereignty. Russia will always pursue a balanced course, and it committed to a multipolar world. Once again, this is not just a message, this is something like the last warning to Zelensky and to Ukraine, which means that the Russian Federation is ready. But the question is what the Russians are ready for. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of source reports that the Russians began the relocation of Tu-95 MS strategic bombers from the Ukraine air base to airfields closer to Ukraine, and this process has been detected. The Russians are massing their forces in the north of the Russian Federation and on the territory of the city of Saratov, with the purpose to attack Ukraine with hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. Most likely the next strike are going to be one of the most powerful since the beginning of the special military operation, because the situation in the Ukraine's energy sector is critical. Ukraine has huge problems with the city of Kyiv, with the city of Kharkiv. By the way, today we received the report that the Russians launched up to 5 Iskander missiles, and as a result of this attack, the Kharkiv power station was completely destroyed without any chances to restore this. Later, a mayor of the city of Kharkiv confirmed this information. Furthermore, there are huge problems with the Odessa region, and of course there are huge problems with the cities of Dnipro and Zaporozhye. But once again, the biggest problem, of course, is with the city of Kyiv. And so once again, what the Russians are ready for? For another massive attack? Yes, they're ready for this, but they were ready for this attack probably more than 100 times before, and they will be ready for another 100 times in the future. So the thing is that the Russians are ready for complete destruction, or not just, maybe not complete destruction, but for dealing significant damage to the entire energy infrastructure that can lead to collapse and the fragmentation of the entire energy system of Ukraine into smaller pieces. At the same time, we see that Zelensky is not going to fall back. He's not going to give up, and he's going to fight. And during the previous 24 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources published lots of videos of their new system. This video shows us the work, the anti-drone drone in action. Here we can see the Russian Guran drone that was flying probably somewhere above the city of Kyiv. And here we can see the moment when the anti-drone drone of the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed that Guran drone. The pro-Ukrainian sources are saying that during this period, during this test period, they managed to bring down 10 out of 10 grand drones that were flying above the city of Kiev. So it means that Ukrainians are showing their possibilities, and they're showing how exactly the Ukrainians are planning to repel the upcoming attack that is going to take place within maybe even hours. And this is not the only video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. This is another video published this evening. Here we can see the same situation. Here we can see the Russian Grand drone that most likely was flying above the city of Kiev, and here we can see the anti-drone drone that was flying right behind. And this is the moments when the anti-drone drone had hit the Russian drone, but for some reason the camera went in other direction, and then we can see explosion. So telling the truth, we don't see the moment when the anti-drone drone attacked the Grand drone, but the author of this video says that this is exactly what happened there. So very interesting video and very varied situation. So anyway, this is the situation, and this is how Ukrainians are planning to repel the possible and upcoming massive attack from the Russian side. And this is going to be not just the strongest and probably the most powerful attack carried out by the Russians since the beginning of the special military operation. This is going to be something like a final duel between the Russia's military capabilities. We're talking about missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, cruise missiles, drones, different types of drones of different generations, and Ukraine's air defense system that has probably several Patriot systems, just regular missiles, and these anti-drone drones. So this is going to be a duel, and most likely this is not just a duel. This is something like the moment when Ukraine is going to show the European countries the capabilities of this system. And if Ukrainians, if Ukraine is able to confirm and to approve this system, most likely then we might see some changes. But obviously, anyway, it will take time. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. Let's wait and see how this duel is going to happen, how this duel is going to take place, because most likely this attack is going to take place within the next day or two, and then we will understand everything. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the northern direction. During the previous 24 hours we had lots of changes, and first let's talk about the Sumy direction. I would like to remind you that yesterday the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that as a result of clashes the Russians managed to improve their position significantly around the settlement by the name of Komarovka. Based on the report that was published yesterday by the Minister of Defense, we adjusted the map, and today neutral mapper added additional changes, and according to his information, the Russians managed to improve their positions, and now the Russians are advancing further in the direction of the settlement by the name of Bila Bereza, which is the second settlement in the northern parts of the Sumy region where the Russians managed to improve their positions. As for the original Sumy direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special, just several FPV drone attacks on the equipment and vehicles of the armored forces of Ukraine that were heading towards the line of combat contact along the second line of defense. So these are the moments and these are the episodes we're talking about. The Russians were attacking everything along and through the second defense layer. As for the Kharkiv direction, during the previous 24 hours, we received lots of updates. Once again, the most important is that Russians, as a result of attack, as a result of 5 strikes with 5 missiles, the Russians managed to destroy the Kharkiv power station number 5, at least according to the local sources, which means that in the coming days, huge problems we'll see in this area as well. At the same time, we see that the Russians are intensifying their offensive operation along the border. During the previous 24 hours, for the first time, probably for 2 years, the Russians attacked the territory around the settlement of Izbitska with heavy artillery system, towed flamethrower system, which means that most likely the Russians are planning to begin offensive operation in this area, so on the Ukrainian side of the river of Seversky Donetsk, and most likely the Russians, maybe the Russians have some plans to combine and to unite these two footholds around the settlement of Liptsy and the city of Volchansk. Or they're going to create a huge big zone and that buffer zone, and then to continue advancing further in the southern direction from these positions. As for the original Volchansk direction, during the previous 12 hours, 24 hours, additional changes were recorded. This is the situation by the end of the 14th of January, and this is the end of the 15th of January. The Russians improved their positions around the settlement of Gravsky. Basically, the settlement was caught by the Russians in pincers. Now Ukrainians either will fall back from this territory in the southern direction, or they will stay there and they will try to cross the river of Seversky Donetsk in the direction of this huge forest, which is most likely more problematic. Anyway, in coming days, most likely the Russians will improve their positions there. Furthermore, the Russians continue clashes and assault operation on the territory of the settlement of Volchansky Hutory. Very reliable pro-Russian sources reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. If this information is correct, then most likely in coming days, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will also confirm this information. As for the Minister of Defense and the Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, during the previous 24 hours, we received a very important update from the area of responsibility of the Group of Forces Center. Valery Gerasimov came to the headquarters of the Group of Forces Center, where he had inspection, where he received reports from different commanders, and it seems I would like to remind you that the Group of Forces Center is responsible for the Dobropolye directions, used to be responsible for the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd directions, and most likely this visit and this inspection means that the Russians are about to finish their greatest regrouping in this area, and most likely in coming weeks the Russians will launch their major offensive operation in the Dobropolye direction with the purpose to get the Kharkiv region from the south, so basically to finish the battle for the Donbass. Now, let's return a bit back and let's continue with the Kupiansk direction. During the previous 24 hours, lots of important things were recorded. First of all, the Russians continued or started once over to bomb and attack the logistic of Ukraine in this area. So now everything that we used to see in August or in September of 2025 is happening once again. The Russians are bombing and attacking the bridges and river crossings through the river of Oskol with everything they have. For example, once again, this video was published today. The Russians destroyed the bridge to the southwest of the settlement of Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. Yesterday, I would like to remind you that there was another attack that took place to the west of the city of Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. Here we can see almost the same story. The Russians discovered the bridge and then the Russians destroyed this bridge with missile attack or with aviation strike. So now the Russians are doing the same thing that they used to do 6 months ago. This is the fifth battle for the city of Kupiansk and for the Kupiansk agglomeration. Now the Russians are trying to establish complete control over the Ukraine's logistic in this area, while the Russian forces are trying to attack the cities of Kupiansk and Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. But at the same time, the chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, Valery Gerasimov, emphasized that the Russians are about to finish the battle for the city of Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. So when talking about his reports and the things that we might see through maps of different mappers, we can see completely different things. So according to Valery Gerasimov, the city of Kupiansk-Uzlovoy is about to be captured by the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. We don't see this on the maps, but if he says, most likely in coming days he will provide us some proofs. Now let's talk about the Barova direction. During the previous 24 hours, lots of very important updates came from this area. Neutral mappers reported that Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their position significantly around the villages of Nova Yegorgivka and Nova Yegorovka Western and the Eastern. So Russians captured this village, and some sources emphasized today that the Russians managed to improve their positions even further in the western direction. So what is the importance of this piece of news, despite the fact that there are just small villages? The thing is that the Russians control more than 99% of the Lugansk region, so 99.7. So which means that there are just few square kilometers, few hundreds or dozens of square kilometers left, and Russians will be able to establish complete control over the Lugansk region. So the progress and this progress on the ground around the villages of Novoyegorovka tells us that most likely the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over the Lugansk region within the next weeks or days. And then Russians, of course, will announce this, and this will be something like a very huge media victory. So we believe that in coming days the Russians will announce about this, about complete control over the Lugansk region. For this purpose, they need to secure the territory around the villages of Nova Yegorovka, and according to different sources, this has already happened. As for the Liman direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians continue destroying the Ukraine's logistics in this area. Another bridge was attacked in this area, and the video was published by pro-Russian sources. Here we can see the attack, how the Russians attacked the bridge with the Tornado S missile system. As you can see, as a result of this attack, the bridge has completely disappeared. So this is the situation in this area, and this is very important because the Ukrainians still have possibilities to send forces in the direction of the city of Liman, and now the Russians are trying to reduce these capabilities as much as possible. And only then the Russians will begin their major offensive operation. There are clashes already along the city limits, but without additional and huge changes in the direction of the central part of the settlement. But due to this situation with Ukraine's logistics, most likely this is going to happen very soon. As for the Slavian's direction, during the previous 24 hours, huge changes were recorded in the area of the villages of Dibrovo and Ozerna. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 14th of January, and this is the end of the 15th. The Russians, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, managed to improve their position significantly. During the previous day, pro-Ukrainian sources published lots of videos of how they were attacking with drones the armored force of the Russian Federation through these two villages. This is the first episode, and this episode was geolocated. These are exactly the buildings that were attacked by the Ukrainian FPV drone operator. And here we have two more videos published from the southwest and the central parts of the settlement of Dibrovo. Here we can see the same story. The Ukrainians were bombing and attacking positions of the armored force of Ukraine in this area with artillery and FPV drone attacks, and these episodes took place in this area. And based on these 2 or 3 videos or 2 or 3 episodes, we have adjusted the map. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 14th of January, and this is the end of the 15th of January. As we can see, the Russians are about to finish the battle for every single settlement and town to the north of the river of Seversky Donetsk, right exactly in this area. And then from these positions, Russians will try to continue offensive operation further in the direction of the villages of Stara Karavan, Brusovka. Maybe Russians will try to cross the river of Seversky Donetsk with the purpose to begin offensive operation towards the settlement of Kriva Luka. As of now, the Ukrainians are holding the lines. It's very difficult process, but they're holding the Russians. They're moving, but not so fast as they used to move right after the end of the battle for the city of Seversk. The most important, but the key word is that the Russians continue advancing. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground to the west of the city of Seversk were also recorded. The Russians are maintaining the lines, so the Russians are shortening the distances and preparing themselves before moving further in the direction of the settlement of Raya Alexandrovka. As for the Konstantinovka direction, we have already discussed. We haven't received anything special during the day in comparison with the previous video. The most important thing is that Russians most likely finished the battle for the Kliban-Bytska water reservoir, and they finished the battle for the territory around. This video was published by a pro-Ukrainian source, and according to this video, the Ukrainians were attacking Russians right exactly at this point. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map, and these are the changes. So it seems that the Russians are about to finish the battle for the territory along M20 and R32 roads. As for the Dobropolye direction, as we discussed minutes ago, the chief of the General Staff of the Armored Forces of the Russian Federation came to inspect the Group of Forces Center, which used to be responsible for the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd directions. Now the same Group of Forces is responsible for the Dobropolye offensive operation, and the visit of the chief of the General Staff means that in coming days the major offensive operation is going to start. As for the Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours, lots of changes were recorded both from the western and the eastern directions. The Russians continue fighting for the settlement of Ternovata, but we haven't received anything from this area since probably the beginning of 2026. At the beginning or at the end of the 2025, pro-Russian sources stated that they managed to cut in pincers the settlement of Ternovata, but yet without additional changes on ground, which means that there were heavy clashes, or the Ukrainians managed to stabilize the situation. At the same time, as for the city of Gulyai-Polye, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their position significantly along the river of Gaichur. The Russians captured at least 3 or 4 strongholds in this area, and there are just 2 or 3 left. We are talking about the strongholds between the villages of Alexandra, Konstantinovka and Priluki. We're talking about this territory, but due to the current pace of offensive, we believe that the Russians will take this territory under complete control within the next days. As for the western Zaporozhye direction, it seems that Ukrainians are not planning to fight for fields and for this gap between the next defense layer and the city of Stepnogorsk. We're talking about these territories. As you can see, we have changes on the ground that were provided by different mappers. The Russians continue advancing without almost any resistance from the Ukrainian side. Furthermore, neutral mappers stated that Russians during the previous days sent lots of groups of sabotage and reconnaissance forces that managed to improve their positions and to answer different villages and towns in this area, trying to understand and to check the common situation with Ukraine's defense. So most likely in coming days we will receive additional changes, but we expect that despite additional progress in the northern direction, first of all, the Russians are tasked to attack the city of Orekha from the west, from the direction that the city and the defense of Orekha wasn't designed for. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.